Sonic the Hedgehog, he sure has an interesting reputation nowadays. I don't want to start this off with a cliche Sonic's had a rocky history, but it's no secret that the quality of a large part of his catalog has been heavily debated in recent times. One of these titles just so happens to be his first outing into 3D, Sonic Adventure. Amidst the rumblings of people discussing if the game is still good, has aged poorly, or was never good in the first place, I struggled to find an opinion for myself. I mean, I played it and remembered enjoying it, but there was nothing past that, which was odd for me, as Sonic games usually leave me with some defining memories for good or bad. And so this is where I find myself today, taking a look back to not only judge if I can recommend it to your average Joe today, but to also finally see whether Sonic Adventure is an overhated gem or one of Sonic's lesser titles. Let's get into it. Before we get into the game proper, we should go back to the past to get a scope of where Sega was at the time. With the failure of the Sega Saturn and the successes of the PlayStation and Nintendo 64, as well as their host of stellar 3D games like Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot, Sega fans were waiting for Sonic to finally make his proper jump into the third dimension. It always seemed like the prospect of Sonic in 3D had been teased for a long time with Sonic R and the Sonic World mode and Sonic Jam, but for a while there was no true 3D Sonic platformer. That is, until 1997, where with the release of the Sega Dreamcast on the horizon, and following the cancellation of what was supposed to be the first 3D Sonic game, Sonic Extreme, Sonic Team began development on a new Sonic title for the upcoming console. The game would become what we know today as Sonic Adventure, released for the Dreamcast in December 1998 in Japan, and September 1999 in North American and PAL regions. And Sonic Adventure release did incredibly well both critically and commercially, however there were still underlying problems that remained at Sega. To put it simply, the Saturn left a big blow on the company, and while the Dreamcast sold well, it still couldn't hold a candle to the sales of Sony and Nintendo. And by 2001, Sega had become a third-party company, which meant developing games for Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft consoles. After this, Sega, wanting to reach new audiences, decided to remaster Sonic Adventure for the GameCube, which would become Sonic Adventure DX, a director's cut, which is a really weird name, and it would be released in June of 2003. Additionally, Sonic Adventure DX would later get ports to Xbox 360, PS3, and Steam. Today I'll be playing the Steam version, and on top of that I'll also be using the Better SADX mod, mainly so that I can record the game in widescreen. The mod doesn't change anything substantial, but if you are curious, I will have it linked in the description for you to check out yourself. But now, with all that out of the way, let's get into the game itself. As soon as you start the game, it immediately leaves an impression with this intense opening cutscene showing all the characters, as well as a glimpse at the new villain you'll have to go against in the game. It instantly gets you ready for action, and even today I still think it looks pretty good. But importantly, this is also where you'll see the new designs these characters got. And personally, I have no problems with any of the designs here, as they still look and feel like the characters we knew and loved before this. And the two characters that are pretty different, being Amy and Robotnik, I find to be better than their original designs. I feel Amy's new design gives her a bit more individuality, whereas her classic design just kinda looked like a girl version of Sonic and never really did it for me personally. Robotnik, meanwhile, feels a lot more detailed and a little more intimidating, which I actually enjoyed. Plus, now he actually looks like an egg instead of being somehow perfectly spherical, so that's good. Sonic Adventure also hosts what feels like an entirely new world for Sonic. I mean, yes, the classic games did have their share of amazing locations. However, Sonic Adventure goes a step further by introducing entire cities inhabited by people, not too far off from jungles with ancient ruins and giant mountains. Some people might argue that it's odd to have humans in Sonic's world, but personally I've never had a problem with it. I mean, Robotnik is a human, so I wouldn't think it's that far off to expect there to be other humans in their world. Although what's even better is the fact that you're able to explore all these areas. as instead of going level to level like in the classic games, in between stages you'll go into these adventure fields and get to explore for emblems and upgrades for your character. I really like going through the adventure fields, although I did get a little annoyed by the Mystic Ruins jungle and how it's basically a maze you have to navigate, but other than that I didn't have a problem with them. On top of that, if you happen to not know where to go next, you can go up to this orange ball thing that will give you a hint as to where you should head next. While we're on the topic of presentation, I'll say that I think this game has aged pretty well. Yes, there are games on competing consoles that not only came out before SADX, but also hold up better in my opinion. But I still think that this game doesn't look half bad either. Character models look good, if a little too shiny at times, and levels not only are colorful, but also contain memorable set pieces that make each one unique. Windy Valley, as you climb through a tornado, Red Mountain has you going underground with rising lava, and Speed Highway has you running down a building while dodging obstacles, and it makes levels genuinely really cool and adds to the attitude and action that Sonic was trying to represent. That's not to say that this game looks perfect, however, because that couldn't be further from the truth. First there's the human NPC models, which just straight up look blocky and almost like they came out of a Nintendo 64 game. And then there's the cutscenes. Yeah, everyone saw this coming. I'm not gonna beat around the bush here, what happened? The lip syncing is non-existent, lines can be delivered questionably, and character movement definitely doesn't help in that aspect.
He's after the pieces of the Master Emerald too! What do you mean? You're not the only one on a wild goose chase, idiot! Why should I ruin your surprise?
I wonder what he meant by that. I'd better find Sonic.
Do I think this makes the story bad? No, not really. And I also don't think it destroys how the game looks overall. But I do think it does hamper the presentation of it and can make certain parts laughable. Also, on the topic of cutscenes, I should talk about voice acting, and overall, it's fine. I mean, I think the voices themselves are good, maybe except for Tails, but I feel my apathy comes from, again, some lines being delivered really weird. Now with that, since this game is split into 6 different stories, and since I have a lot to say about each of them, I think it's best that I go over each of them individually so I don't skimp out on any details. With that all out of the way, I think it's time we get into the game proper, and we have nowhere else to start off than with Sonic himself.
Select a character.
Let's get him!
Sonic's story starts off with him running on the rooftops and following the police who have surrounded this new figure, a water beast that the game refers to as Chaos. Sonic takes care of him swiftly, and a little while later we run into Tails, who explains he's using the Chaos Emerald as a source for his plane, and tells us to go to his workshop in the Mystic Ruins, where the two of them have their first run-in with Robotnik.
If it isn't Sonic!
Look, it's a giant talking egg!
Silence!
Oh right, that reminds me. Starting with this game, Robotnik is now referred to as Eggman, which, funnily enough, was always his name in Japan. Anyway, Eggman steals a Chaos Emerald from Sonic and Tails and reveals he's controlling the beast Chaos we saw earlier, as well as demonstrating how he's using the emeralds to make Chaos stronger. After this, the rest of Sonic's story boils down to him and Tails trying to gather the emeralds, with Eggman later stealing them and making Chaos stronger. Along the way, Sonic also runs into Knuckles, Amy, Big, and finally E102 Gamma in that order. Running into a new character also gives you the ability to play through their story, so once you're done with Sonic's story, you'll have everyone else unlocked, which is good. As a whole, I don't really have any problems with Sonic's story. I feel it's simple and does what it needs to do while moving along at a good pace. I do have a problem with specific parts of Sonic's story, though. Particularly the ways that Eggman steals the emeralds from Sonic and Tails are just stupid, in my opinion. There's a grabby claw and knockout gas, and the best one being when Eggman straight up picks them off the ground after a fight between Sonic and Knuckles. It all just feels so contrived. like they needed Eggman to steal the emeralds to keep the plot going, but didn't want to come up with something to justify how it would happen, so instead they just whipped something up quick that would result in him getting the gems. Despite this, I do enjoy how Sonic's story wraps up with this intense fight between Sonic and Eggman that manages to feel intense and have a legitimately good boss tied to it. Now, when it comes to Sonic's gameplay, I think they did a great job transitioning the classic formula into 3D. Sonic can spin dash like usual, however they changed it so now you just hold down a button to rev up, and you don't need to be stopped to charge up a spin dash, which helps keep up the speed. He also has a new move, that being the homing attack. When you press the jump button in mid-air, Sonic will homing on the object closest to him, which is usually stuff like enemies, items, and springs. The homing attack makes attacking in this 3D space really quick and easy, and when there's nothing to attack, it can even act as a dash to get a good boost in speed. But despite this, it doesn't invalidate your other attacking options like rolling or jumping into enemies, and because of this I feel it's a well-balanced addition. I also feel Sonic's speed in this game was made just right to make exploration and platforming not feel annoying, while also allowing you to blast through levels if you're skilled enough. Speaking of which, level design is mostly a joy to go through as each of them contain hidden goodies like rings and shields, as well as multiple routes which not only make for fun stages but also gives you incentives to replay them. Also, another new addition for every character are upgrades. At certain parts of the story, you either can or will be required to get an upgrade. Sonic has a total of 3, the Lightspeed Dash, Crystal Ring, and Ancient Light. The Lightspeed Dash allows you to zoom across a line of rings, which sounds like a really cool idea, but to be able to actually use it, you first need to charge it up, which kills any chance of it being a cool tool to use in levels. The Crystal Ring shortens the charge-up time for the Lightspeed Dash, but the fact that you have to charge it up at all makes using it annoying. Then there's the Ancient Light, which is the most pointless out of all the upgrades, as it allows you to attack enemies with the Lightspeed Dash. But why would I ever stop to charge up a Lightspeed Dash to take out an enemy instead of just attacking them normally? Thankfully, you are rarely ever required to actually use the Lightspeed Dash, and the Ancient Light is used once and then never again, so they don't hamper the levels in any way. With that, we close out Sonic's story, and overall this is one of the highlights of the game for me. I feel they just nailed what it should be to control Sonic in the 3D space with some truly fun and imaginative stages. My personal favorites were Twinkle Park and Speed Highway. That doesn't mean we're done yet though, far from it, since the other 5 stories still need to be worked through, so we should sift on over to Tails' story.
Here I come, Sonic!
Thankfully, when it comes to story, there's not much to discuss since Tails follows most of the same plot beats that Sonic does. However, there is an added element of Tails learning to be more confident and independent from Sonic, and I'm somewhat mixed on it. I think it's a great idea, but the execution of it leaves a lot to be desired, mainly because it doesn't feel as integral a part of Tails' story as it should be. It's only mildly brought up at a couple points, and by the time it finally does come to the forefront, his story's almost over, which really sucks. I do like, however, how Tails' story has mildly changed from Sonic's and how it makes Eggman slightly more intimidating, which actually does help contribute to Tails' self-growth story.
I will make you all pay for this.
Let's get out of here!
You fool. Away, before I make mincemeat out of you.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I can do this!
Overall, I'm fine with Tails' story. I just feel like his independence plot point could have been elaborated on a little more, that's all. But with that, we can move on to Tails' gameplay. To start with how he controls, he's just as good as Sonic. There are differences though, obviously. He can fly, which is fluid and fast. He can't spin dash, but he can do a tail attack and will roll into enemies if he attacks while running fast enough. Unlike Sonic, however, Tails' gameplay revolves around him racing against Sonic and in his final level, Eggman. Unfortunately, these races reveal an overarching issue I have with Sonic Adventure as a whole. Every character goes through the same stages. The way this is set up is that there are 11 stages, and each character will go through their own assortment of them. Sonic goes through 10, and Tails, Knuckles, and Big for some reason go through 5, Amy goes through 3, and Gamma goes through 4. This isn't inherently a problem, but what makes it an issue is that stages are only sometimes redesigned for a specific character, which can not only create an inconsistency issue, it can also cause problems when a character didn't have stages redesigned to accommodate their exclusive abilities. I'll get more into this in each character's individual stories, so for now I'll talk about how this affects Tails. Well, since these stages were designed to be run-on, and you're now capable of flying over large segments, it makes everything extremely easy. But they try to mask this by having the AI rubber band like crazy, so if you get far ahead, Sonic will seemingly teleport to be gaining on you, when in reality he is really slow, to the point where you can beat these races without needing to fly in the first place. This isn't helped by the fact that you get an upgrade for Tails before even starting his first stage called the Jet Anklet, which allows you to fly faster. I mean, did we really need to make it even easier to beat these already easy races? Also, since I don't know where to bring this up, Tails' second upgrade, that being the Rhythm Badge, is really helpful, as it allows you to do your tail spin attack for an infinite duration if you hold down the attack button. The problem is that you find it in one of the many instances in this game where you get teleported into a flashback segment, and because of this, if you miss the Rhythm Badge, you aren't able to go back and get it. And I only mention this because it's the only instance of this happening in the entire game, and it's kind of annoying. Anyway, back on track. There's only one race I enjoyed, and it was the one in ice capping. It's only because you and Sonic are both on snowboards, meaning you're on equal ground, and it feels like an actual race. That has its own problems, however, since the snowboard has this weird thing where if you're in midair, you lose almost all your speed and momentum, which is really easy to do when there are hills that launch you into the air all over the place. Other than that one level, though, Tails' story didn't really do it for me. It was just too easy to actually feel substantial, and for most of it, I was on autopilot. I wouldn't say it was bad, just sort of mediocre, which really sucks to say because I can see glimpses of fun to be had here, but with the way it is right now, there just wasn't much interesting going on. Well, that was unfortunate, but next up is Knuckles, so let's see if he'll do any better.
Okay, let's go!
Knuckles' story actually starts at the beginning of the entire interconnected story, interestingly enough. Knuckles is doing his job defending the Master Emerald amidst pondering what led him to be the sole guardian of the thing in the first place. His inner thoughts are cut short, however, when Dr. Eggman swoops in and shatters the Master Emerald, releasing chaos as well as this strange orange ball that's definitely not Tikal, and this causes Angel Island to fall into the ocean again. Eggman and Chaos flee the scene, and it's now the job of Knuckles to recover the pieces of the Master Emerald and restore Angel Island to floating in the sky. Overall, I actually really like Knuckles' story. It's simple, but gives a little more insight into Knuckles himself, as we see his isolation on Angel Island makes him an outcast to the outside world, which is mostly felt when he goes to Station Square since it's a giant city filled with people. This even leads to him getting tricked by Eggman later into believing Sonic is after the Master Emerald pieces. We also learn a lot about the ancient Echidna tribe in this story, which is fitting. However, I'm going to leave all that for later on when it becomes more important. For now, I'll say it adds an interesting layer to Knuckles' story, but seeing as he's the last of the Echidna tribe and is essentially witnessing the downfall that caused him to be the last one, I wish he would have reacted a little bit more to the events that play out, but other than that, I thought it was pretty good. So what does Knuckles do exactly? Well, while Sonic and Tails were put into linear levels that were about reaching the goal, Knuckles takes a different approach and is placed in sandboxes where he needs to explore to find the Master Emerald shards. There are 3 in each level, and upon collecting all of them, the stage is completed. To help with this, you get a radar that will tell you how far away or how close you are to an emerald piece. Additionally, there are many locations that the pieces can be found at, like out in the open, placed in a well-hidden area, inside objects or enemies, or even underground and in walls. Although for that last one, you'll need an upgrade called the Shovel Claw, which allows you to dig in soft surfaces, and overall I think it's a great upgrade that helps increase the variety in emerald shard placement, And it's also pretty fitting for Knuckles himself, since he is an echidna after all. The only qualm I have with it is that using it is a little awkward, since you have to press the jump button and the action button at the same time, but other than that I had no problems with it. The same cannot be said for the fighting gloves though. These give you access to the maximum heat and Knuckles attack, which sounds cool, but in practice it really isn't. First you charge up your attack, which makes you move really slow for some reason, and once you finally charged it up, you home in on the enemy closest to you. My main problem is, why would you want to sit there and charge it up when you could easily glide into an enemy and kill them in a couple seconds? There's only one part of the game where it's actually helpful anyway, and it's in the Chaos 6 fight, and it's only because it does double the damage. But honestly, in this playthrough, I completely forgot to get the upgrade, which means that I bypassed the only section of the game where it was useful, and I also don't have any footage of me using it, which is just fantastic. Moving past that though, Knuckles is where we first see levels redesigned to complement gameplay. Selectively anyway. There's levels like Speed Highway where you're just placing a portion of the full level, and then there's ones like Red Mountain where Knuckles gets this completely unique canyon section to go through. As such, Knuckles' story is where I first have my problems with inconsistency. If they decide to make new sections for stages like Casinopolis and entirely new levels like with Red Mountain, why do they leave other levels completely unchanged? Thankfully, this doesn't affect too much in the case of Knuckles, but it just brings into question why characters that needed levels redesigned for them like Tails barely had any changes made to them. Despite this inconsistency making me a little annoyed, I do have to compliment how they made levels for Knuckles, as they're very fun to explore and the radar does a good job of finding emerald pieces. Although sometimes it's a little too good at finding emeralds, as on the occasion, mostly in Lost World and Casinopolis, the radar will detect like 2 emerald pieces as soon as you start, which can make things a little too easy, but it's not terrible. If you are stuck, however, you're able to go over to Tikal and she'll lead you in the general direction of the emeralds. However, I personally tried to avoid this, as in my opinion, it makes it really easy to find the emeralds and takes away most of the fun of exploring for them. I also want to mention that I was surprised to find that Skydeck was a lot better as Knuckles, since you get to shift the gravity yourself, making navigation way easier. So yeah, Knuckles was a pleasant surprise, since despite providing a different take on the Sonic formula, there was still a lot of fun to be had with some genuinely great levels, so now let's hope that Amy can keep our momentum going.
It's my turn now!
So, Amy's story doesn't really have much going on in it. It mostly revolves around Amy trying to protect a bird she found being chased by a robot named Zero. That is, until she gets kidnapped and put in a cell aboard the egg carrier. That was short-lived. She thankfully gets released by Gamma, and later sees that the pendant the bird had contained a picture of the bird's families, somehow. This makes Amy's new mission to reunite the bird family, which she quickly finds on the egg carrier crash site. All of a sudden, a surprise attack is launched by Zero on one of the birds, and then this commences the final battle with Zero. And honestly, this wasn't that interesting to me. It feels like they wanted to do something at the end, with Amy mentioning how she wants to get Sonic to respect her, but this isn't built up at all throughout the story and kind of comes out of nowhere at the end. My main issues I have with the story are the little bit I mentioned at the end with her wanting to get Sonic to respect her, since it comes completely out of nowhere, and how nothing substantial really happens in Amy's story. I mean, yeah, Eggman does get one of the emeralds from the bird's pendant, and the birds are relevant to Gamma's story in particular, but apart from those 2 minor things, it doesn't feel like Amy's story has a point, and it doesn't affect the larger narrative as a whole. In general, making it feel like the story has little to no substance. Now for Amy's gameplay, and yeah, it doesn't get much better. Amy is probably my second least favorite character in the game, and it comes down to how boring it is, just because everything is made so much slower and basic. Why would everything be slower? Well, because Amy herself is just a slow character. Yeah, for some reason they decided to cut her speed in half, and have her main gimmick be the use of her hammer, and in all honesty, I actually don't have much of a problem with using the hammer. I mean, yeah, I'd rather just jump or roll into enemies to get rid of them, but overall I do think that the hammer works well at defeating enemies and is a fun and unique take. But that doesn't get rid of the problem that Amy moves too slow to traverse these levels comfortably, in my opinion. It wouldn't be that big a problem if she had some way to gain speed, but since she doesn't, it leaves me jumping around trying to get anywhere quickly. Then there's also the other gimmick to her stages being Zero. Throughout Amy's stages, Zero will try to catch her, and if he does, that's a life lost. Only one problem, he's really bad at it. No joke, you have to actively try to get caught by Zero, because not only can you swat him away with your hammer, which leaves him stunned for a generous amount of time, when he does actually have you in a prime position to get kidnapped, he takes so long to actually do it that you're able to escape before he's even halfway through the process. Also, I should mention that Amy's levels are all giving unique areas to go through, and of them I only liked one, that being the Mirror Room in Twinkle Park. I thought it was a fun little set piece that kept things moving along, but the main problem is that Zero is supposed to be the main threat here, but he's so slow you can get through it without any trouble. But then there's the gimmicks in Hot Shelter and Final Egg, both of which are just meant to waste your time, as Hot Shelter just loves having you put these colored cubes inside these holes while doing nothing else interesting. And then there's Final Egg, which has a section where you have to check all these doors to find the one that's the correct pathway. I'm sorry, but is this supposed to be interesting or challenging in any way? If you pick the wrong door and nothing bad happens, you can just walk out and pick another door. You don't even have to defeat the enemy that's inside of it. It serves no purpose. Plus, with all these useless gimmicks, it only serves to increase how long levels go on for, which makes some of them go on for nearly 10 minutes, and despite Amy only getting 3 levels, it felt like double that time with the boring level design in combination with the long level times, and it was really disappointing. Now, with that slog out of the way, it's time to get into our first newcomer, E102 Gamma.
Preparations complete.
Alright, so Gamma's story I actually found pretty cool and engaging. With him being an Eggman robot, it starts off with him first being activated, and then a little while later, he's tasked with finding this frog with a tail, but when Gamma's the only one that comes back successful, Eggman just gets rid of the other robots like they're pieces of junk. Seeing Gamma work under Eggman just gives you a little bit more of a glimpse into what he's really like, and despite how silly he can come off at times, he's still, well, not the good guy, that's for sure. Showing how he really doesn't care about anyone or anything unless they get the job done properly. After this, Gamma's commanded to go get the bird from Amy, who's in her cell, but before we get to that, Gamma goes into the wrong room and sees E101 Beta being rebuilt, and since Gamma was only activated a little bit ago, he doesn't really know what to make of this and seems a little horrified, but then the mood gets kinda killed.
Beta. This is the wrong room.
Okay, that was kinda funny. Anyway, once Gamma actually goes into Amy's cell, he has a change upon seeing the bird, and makes it his new mission to disobey Eggman's orders, and with his newfound free will, save his robot brothers by destroying them and freeing the animal inside. This is really cool, but also brings up several questions like, do badniks have a connection to the animal inside them? And can the animals influence the thoughts of the robots in any way? None of which get answered, which I wasn't really asking for, but it's still kind of interesting to think about. Although, going through Gamma's story, you begin to realize that there's an animal inside him too, so does that mean he would have to destroy himself? And surprisingly, the story does take that turn, as Gamma finds himself contemplating it in a scene that gives me chills every time I see it, if I'm gonna be honest.
E105 Zeta rescue complete. Units remaining. Gamma.
Unfortunately, we don't have too much time to think about that, as Gamma has to face off against the new and improved Vega. Gamma wins, but with Vega's last ounce of energy, he fires a single shot at Gamma, causing him to go down for good. And yes, I mean for good, because after this game, Gamma would never be seen again. Well, yes, later games, namely Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Battle, would have reproduced lines of the Gamma series robots, but the Gamma we know and play as in this game is effectively dead, making this scene actually pretty sad for a Sonic game. The two birds that were released also happen to be the family of the Flicky that Amy had with her, so that's nice, but man, what a way to go out. Overall, this might be my favorite character story out of the bunch. It left me constantly engaged throughout with cutscenes that I was invested in despite the dated presentation, and it's definitely a highlight of the game for me. Now, does Gamma have good gameplay to complement a good story? To put it simply, yes. Basically, Gamma is a spin on the traditional platforming that also allows you to shoot up guys with your arm cannon. The way this works is you hold down the attack button, which emits this laser that allows you to lock onto your targets. Once you let go, you watch the carnage unfold. Not only is blowing up everything in your path satisfying, it's also vital to standing a chance in Gamma's levels. Once you start the level, you're given very limited time to get to the finish, but you're able to earn more time by blowing stuff up, with you being rewarded bigger time bonuses the more things you destroy in a combo, which just incentivizes you to annihilate everything in your path. It also is just kinda cool being able to play as an Eggman robot mowing down other robots, and I'd be lying if I said it wasn't extremely satisfying running through levels blowing everything to bits. This made even more fun with Gamma's upgrades, which I found very useful this time around, mainly the hover, which you get midway through the story. All it does is allow you to hover through mid-air, but I feel it controls so well that it's just fun flying around. So yeah, in general, Gamma's gameplay is very fun. Like, it's on the same level of Sonic's gameplay to me, as he's not only fun to control, but his levels also come with a bunch of unique set pieces like the shooting range in Final Egg and the training hot shelter, both of which not only provide a unique flair to Gamma's levels, but also allow for a consistent level flow that makes Sonic games fun. That and occasionally you'll be putting a room filled to the brim with enemies to destroy, and getting that chance in a level to just sit there, lock on, and let it rip is cathartic, to say the least. That's not to say it's perfect, however, because there is one laughable aspect in the form of end-stage bosses. I was saving bosses for once we're done talking about all 6 main stories, but since these are exclusive to Gamma, I figured it was best to mention them now. Once Gamma has the mission to destroy his fellow E100 robots, starting with Windy Valley, at the end of his stages he has to fight one of them, and it's pathetic. Since in the fights against Delta and Epsilon you could just stand still and shoot at them, getting through the fight completely unscathed with no effort required, and the fight against Zega is only marginally better because you have to circle around him and destroy his turrets. Wild, I know. Despite that little bump there, I think Gamma is one of the best stages to go through alongside Sonic and Knuckles, and is another example of how multiple gameplay styles in Sonic games can actually be fun and engaging to go through. With that, we only have one character left to get through, and we all know who they are, so let's just get it over with.
Select your character. Hold on, Froggy. I'm coming.
I guess this is where I discuss Big's plot, but let's be real, does Big even have a plot? At the start of his story, Froggy swallows a bit of chaos, and it gives him a tail for some reason, and the rest of the story is a wild goose chase where we always catch the frog, but then it somehow gets away. Although I guess that would make it a wild frog chase instead, haha. Eventually you find it on the egg carrier, and apparently Eggman wants the frog because, since part of Chaos is in Froggy's tail, he needs to give Froggy Chaos so that he'll get powered up, because apparently Chaos is incomplete, which hasn't really been hinted at throughout the entire story, which just makes it seem like a contrived way of forcing Big into the plot. Honestly, I don't really have much to say here. Big doesn't really do much to the overarching plot as a whole. and so we're just gonna move past it and pretend nothing happened. Now for Big's gameplay, and this is why the character is so infamous. Fishing. Yeah, Big's gameplay is all about fishing. No platforming, no speed, and not much of anything, really. You get fishing and you're gonna like it. This already presents a problem, like, why is this mandatory? It would be a lot better served for a side minigame, but instead it's one of the core gameplay mechanics of a Sonic the Hedgehog game, which is just amazing. And while this already sounds completely stupid, at the very least, is the fishing a little fun? No. Okay, so basically how this works is in each level there is multiple bodies of water, and what you gotta do is cast your line and try to catch Froggy. When your line is in the water, you can hold A to reel it in, and occasionally jerk the thing around by pressing left and right, I think. Once a fish finally decides it wants to take a nibble on your stupid fishing rod, you'll have to reel it in by holding A, but don't hold it for too long or else your line will break. Now, it's pretty obvious why this fails at being an integral part of a Sonic game, but I think it'd be more interesting to figure out why this fails from the perspective of a fishing game, starting with your ability to jerk your rod wherever you feel like it. First, what purpose does it serve? I mean, yeah, I guess it helps you orient your rod better with Froggy, but if it were meant for orienting yourself, why does it throw you a far distance in the direction you choose instead of allowing you to move it as short or far away as you want? Also, why does it only work when it feels like? I'll be mashing a direction to move my lure and it will just not budge. And then other times, it'll move just fine. It just makes it feel really clunky and kind of broken. Next, you'll notice I've been mentioning fish as a general term, and that's because Froggy isn't the only aquatic animal in these pools. You gotta contend with other fish that serve no purpose whatsoever. To be able to complete the stages, you've gotta catch Froggy, no exceptions. As such, if a fish decides to attach itself to your lure, you now gotta find some way to make it leave so you can get back to catching Froggy. Speaking of catching fish, another problem I have is, what constitutes a hit? Usually when a fish grabs onto the lure, it'll say you have a hit, and you'll get into the reeling minigame. That's not my problem. My problem is that sometimes Froggy decides to grab onto the lure, and then just immediately detach. Like, what am I doing wrong here? When they grab onto the fishing rod, it looks the same as all the other times, so why does it sometimes hit and sometimes not? It just serves to make these stages more annoying than they already are. Speaking of annoying levels, let's talk about Ice Cap as Big, the absolute bottom of the barrel for this game in my opinion. Not only does it make you navigate a maze as Big, who has like no movement options to speak of, you also can't just fish normally, that would be asinine. First you gotta break open certain parts of the ice to make fishing holes, and then search to hope Froggy is even down the one you went to. If not, congratulations, now you gotta keep checking different holes until you find the one he's in, and it's just the worst. Especially since this level is split into two completely different areas sectioned off by an underwater tunnel you have to swim through very slowly every single time. And because of that, you won't know if Froggy is on one half of the level opposite from you until you've already searched the entire area you're in. On that note, it's kind of important to discuss upgrades, because it'll tie into another problem I have. Big has the most upgrades out of the cast with a whopping 6. Now, while that sounds all nice, 4 of those are lure upgrades used to catch bigger fish for the B and A rank missions. While this doesn't bother me that much, mainly just because it also makes catching Froggy slightly easier, why 4 of them in the first place? To me, it would have been better if we had a more powerful lure by default, and then had around 2 lure upgrades or something, so that in the earlier portion of the game, you aren't having to go to battle with this frog so much. The 2 unique upgrades aren't much either. First, there's the Power Rod, which allows you to throw the rod further, and seems completely pointless as it doesn't add much of anything to the stages. And on top of that, Froggy is usually close enough to land that you don't need it very often. And then there's the Life Belt, which is where my main problem begins. It lets you swim through water, which is cool. And then it also lets you get right next to Froggy, but for some reason you can't just pocket him and run. Which leads to the main point. Couldn't we have gotten access to more fishing tools to at least try to give the gameplay more semblance of variety? Like maybe a level that doesn't focus on fishing and has you swimming around, and you get some sort of fishing net upgrade here used to catch Froggy. I don't know, dude, just anything to make this more interesting. Big's gameplay is a bewildering case where when it's not aggravating, it's just plain boring, which leads to levels either getting cleared in 1 minute or 10 minutes. And overall, why is this even here in the first place? So, you beat all the stories, what now? Well, upon going back to the character select screen, you've unlocked a final story, Supersonic. And while I'd love to dive in headfirst, I think now would be a good time to discuss bosses and minigames, as well as how good they stack up. Which, well, it's a mixed bag to say the least. Bosses in this game are split into two different kinds, character battles and just normal bosses. We'll start with the former, cause, wow, character battles are a complete joke. Like, honestly, if you died to one of these, you deserve a pat on the back, cause that takes some serious effort to do. These battles are basically the same as the battles Gamma had at the end of his stages, but here they're supposed to be mildly important to the plot, which just makes it that much more funny when you get done with them in a couple seconds. Oh no, indeed. Bosses are better, but that doesn't mean they're super good either. A lot of them have you waiting for a weak point to be revealed, and it gets pretty boring at times. Mainly with the Egg Walker and especially Chaos 4, with that one being really egregious because you have to fight it as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Chaos 2 is also stupid since it's half waiting around and half a war of attrition. Most of the other bosses aren't really notable since they're either way too easy to comment on or don't leave much of an impression. That is, except for 3 bosses, the Egg Viper, Zero, and Vega Mark Ii, being the final bosses for Sonic, Amy, and Gamma respectively. Starting with the Egg Viper first, this was a pretty good way to close off Sonic's story in my opinion, and it provided a pretty fun fight with some fair difficulty, and that part where he dive bombs the platforms as soon as he's down for the count is pretty cool and may even catch you off guard. Meanwhile, Zero, while not being a particularly great boss, maybe not even a good one, I think was a great way to end Amy's story, giving you the opportunity to beat to death the robot that was pretty annoying throughout the entire story. And it was really satisfying even if it was just an okay boss. Then there's Vega Mark II, being a really good Gamma boss that requires you to do more than just stand in one place and shoot. He throws a bunch of attacks at you and challenges you to constantly be expecting his next move, while also staying on the move yourself. You have to get in shots whenever you can, and I thought it was a really good time. Lastly, we've got minigames. These would occasionally pop up during the story and give you some different gameplay things to do. Stuff like ragging cars in Twinkle Park, playing Hedgehog Hammer as Amy, and sand surfing as Tails. I think these are fine, they don't intrude, and generally provide some fun gameplay variety. And some of them I even quite enjoyed, like the before-mentioned Hedgehog Hammer and Sandhill. But not all minigames are created equal, unfortunately, and that's where Sky Chase comes in. Here you have to shoot down some enemies nearby the egg carrier while flying on the tornado, but it's just so boring and takes forever. There's no challenge to it either. I could probably beat this thing with my eyes closed. All it does is serve to waste your time and bring the pace of the story to a screeching halt. The worst thing is you have to do the same 2 Sky Chase levels twice. Since Sonic and Tails were both on the plane when this was going on, that means you gotta do it 2 times in each story. Personally, I already didn't like the classic plane levels like Sky Chase in Sonic 2 or Mirage Saloon in Sonic Mania. So seeing that it's mandatory to do the plane stuff 4 times just destroys how much I'm enjoying the game at that point. But now, without further ado, let's finally finish off Chaos.
Which character?
Before we do the plot of the Supersonic story, I think it's important to discuss the story of the ancient echidnas that's given to you throughout the game, and that I've been alluding to. If you're wondering why I decided to leave this part until the final story, It's because it allows me to talk about all of it without it being so scattered. So, long ago, the Echidna tribe lived in peace in an ancient city near an altar that housed the Master Emerald and the Chaos Emeralds, as well as happening to be the place where the Ciao lived. Among the Echidna tribe is the daughter of the tribe's ruler named Tikal, who spent a lot of time at the altar and ended up befriending the Ciao, as well as their guardian. The peace would not last, however, as in an effort to gain more power for their tribe, their leader, Pachacamac, I think that's how you say it, tries to seize the emeralds from the altar despite Tikal urging them not to do it. But they do it anyway, so the tribe ends up rushing the altar despite her warnings, and the Guardian, angered by the Ciao being injured as well as the greed of the tribe, reveals itself, and the Guardian turns out to be Chaos himself. In his rage, Chaos eradicated the whole of the Echidna tribe, but before Chaos could cause any more havoc, Tikal decided the only way to prevent Chaos from causing more destruction to the world would be to seal both of them inside of the Master Emerald, where they would remain until Eggman later shattered it, releasing Chaos once again. Now, honestly, all of this helps make Sonic's world a little more interesting, and also helps to expand on why Knuckles is the last of his kind, while at the same time giving our new villain Chaos some lore instead of just being a means for Eggman to have a new attempt at defeating Sonic. I just wish that when this information was given to you, it didn't feel so fragmented and generally mishandled. You get this story information in all 6 stories, as well as being given to you at random intervals and generally out of order. Now, I don't strictly have a problem with this, I just wish there was a way of seeing these flashback scenes pieced together, especially since some of the flashbacks don't even add much to the complete story here. I also thought it was a little weird experiencing these flashbacks of some characters. Like, with Knuckles, for instance, out of everyone else, he gets the most flashbacks, which makes sense as it's a story about his race after all, and therefore it's most connected to him. But then there's other times where you go through the flashbacks as Big and it's just, he feels so out of place. I also don't like the way these flashbacks are integrated into the plot, as after you finish certain levels, you'll just be transported into them, and it doesn't feel as seamlessly woven in as I would like. It's more like the game is telling you that it's time to learn about the Echidnas now, whether you like it or not. It's heightened even more when, in the final story, Sonic goes into a flashback while Tails and Knuckles are around, and when he wakes up, Tails says he just conked out all of a sudden, and while yeah, it's pretty funny, it just proves my point even more. Now for the Supersonic Plot. It begins with everyone just kind of lounging about, which I found mildly humorous, don't know why. However, things take a turn for the worse when Chaos betrays Eggman and tries to take the emeralds for himself. After attacking Knuckles and getting 6 of them at the altar, he heads for the final emerald contained within the tornado as a power source. Sonic and Tails make haste to stop him, but are too late, and with the power of all 7 emeralds, he transforms into perfect chaos and ravages the whole of Station Square. Like, wow, this is some serious destruction here. Buildings are being destroyed, sewer water is blasting everywhere. But don't worry, no casualties. One shot the city is filled to the brim with people, the next there's not a soul to be seen. I guess they didn't feel like existing anymore. Eggman attempts to destroy Perfect Chaos, but the beast makes quick work of the egg carrier, slicing through it like it's nothing. It's at this point where Tikal appears, and might I mention how weird it is that the game acts as if Tikal turning out to be the glowing orange ball is this big reveal when, I don't know, I thought it was really obvious. I digress. Chaos absorbs the energy of the emeralds, and Tikal says the only way to stop him is to seal Chaos back in the Master Emerald. However, in one of Sonic's smarter moments, he realizes that even if he's sealed back up again, his anger will still remain and not much will have changed. All of our heroes come together and give the emeralds to Sonic, even the bird inside Gamma. I thought that was nice. Tails mentions how Chaos only absorbed the negative energy of the emeralds, so they still might be of use to Sonic. And so, absorbing the positive power of the emeralds, Sonic transforms into Supersonic and heads off into battle. After defeating Chaos, and with the beast now calm, seeing the Ciao living peacefully, he goes into the heavens with Tikal, at least I think that's what's happening here. And the game ends with Sonic going to chase after Eggman once again. This is an amazing finale, honestly. The pure devastation that Perfect Chaos leaves in his wake sets up for an epic battle with easily Sonic's most threatening foe at this point in the series, which is further accentuated with how intimidating Perfect Chaos looks. And I find the fact that Sonic's first giant threat is a water beast to be pretty appropriate. The final boss against Perfect Chaos also adds to the satisfaction as well, since it's easily one of the best bosses in the game. Playing as Supersonic here is also super fun. He pretty much controls like Sonic, but his speed and acceleration are jacked up to insane levels, making it all the more satisfying when you blaze past all the hazards coming your way and land a significant blow to Chaos. I know I haven't talked much about music yet, but it does an amazing job here, starting with this orchestral piece emphasizing the destructiveness of Chaos and how scary he actually is. But once you transition into the second phase, Open Your Heart kicks in, and it really pumps you up as Sonic starts overpowering him, and it's really good, okay? Overall, this is a fantastic finale to this game, and it's no wonder why this has become an iconic moment in the entire franchise. Now that we've finished with all the main gameplay segments, is there anything else? Well, actually, yeah, there's quite a bit. Mostly extra modes and music, so let's start with the latter. To put it simply, this game's soundtrack is incredible. Every song not only fits the level, but is also a great piece on its own, with a lot of them I find myself listening to occasionally. In fact, I even listened to a lot of the tunes while writing this script. My personal favorites are the songs for Final Egg, Red Mountain's Interior, and also the Crashed Egg Carrier theme. This game also introduced theme songs for all 6 of our main characters, and they're all absolutely delightful, and capture each character's personalities really well with this laid-back tune for Big and this upbeat one for Sonic. But personally, Gamma's is easily my favorite. Now for different modes, Sonic Adventure has a surprising wealth of post-game stuff for you to accomplish. To start, there's these different rank missions for you to do for each character's stages. These usually have you needing to work around different stipulations while getting through the levels. Some of them are pretty easy, like when you have to get to the end of the stage while collecting 50 rings as Sonic and Tails. And then there's others that are pretty challenging, like Sonic's time trials or getting to the end of Gamma's stages with a specific amount of time left. Those in particular I remember having a difficult time with. But of course, the most aggravating out of all of them are Big's missions. They're all the same thing, catch a fish with a big enough weight. Just you'll need a gigantic fish for the A-rank missions. This is mostly why there were so many lure upgrades, so that you have an easier time catching a lot of the big fish. But it has the same problems as the normal stages, just now you gotta hope the fish you're catching is big enough. It wouldn't be so bad if the game told you how big each fish is, but no, you just have to catch one and hope it's big enough for you to be able to complete the stage, and it's just as bad as it sounds. Next, there's mission mode, and I don't really have anything to say here. You go around as different characters in the hub worlds and pick up these cards that have different missions for you, then you go to the place where you can complete the mission, usually in a certain level, although sometimes there's missions to do in the hub worlds. And then you just complete whatever you were told to do. There's not much going on, it's just kind of there and a little bit repetitive. I've only done it once when I decided to 100% this game. But I'm not upset that it's here, so I don't really care that much. Most noteworthy thing here are the random Sonic X references. God, I remember when that show was running. But that's a discussion for another day, probably. The last side mode is the Ciao Garden, and didn't really spend much time on it here. It's like one of those virtual pet simulators. You pet it, feed it, give it animals, and raise it to be amazing at competing in these Ciao races. But that's about it. Personally, my Ciao Garden time was mostly spent in the next game we'll be taking a look at, so now going back to the Ciao Garden here just seems a little bit primitive in comparison. Now, the last thing to mention is probably the most important part of the side content in this game, the Emblems. Emblems are a major collectible in this game, and you get them when you complete pretty much anything. completing stages, completing their different ranks. They're even hidden throughout the hub world and given to you for completing Ciao races, and there's a whopping 130 of them. Collecting emblems doesn't just give you a special reward for collecting all of them, but also getting certain amounts of emblems gives you Sonic Game Gear games. Even better is by the time you have all the emblems, you'll pretty much have Sonic's entire Game Gear library, which is awesome, but you're probably wondering, well, what do you get for collecting every single emblem? Well...
Select your character.
Yeah, that's right, you get to play as Metal Sonic himself, and it's cool, but not worth going through the trouble of getting all the emblems, in my opinion. The main reason for this is that he's basically just Sonic. He doesn't really have any special abilities of his own, and he's only able to go through the stages that Sonic can. I mean, it's a cool addition, but it would have been cooler if he had a couple of unique moves, or even would be able to go through levels Sonic didn't in his playthrough, like Hot Shelter. But I would have especially loved if you were able to play as Supersonic, but no, unfortunately. And yeah, I didn't feel like going through the trouble of doing everything again, so I just used an old save file where I already had 100%. It's cool, but not worth it to me. Also, this is just a little something I wanted to throw in here. But when I said it would have been cool to play as Supersonic, I guess someone had the exact same thought, and a cool little addition that was thrown into the better SADX mod is the ability to play as Supersonic in the Sonic stages after beating the game. And it's really cool using this broken character to blitz through the stages easily. Not much more to say here, I just thought it was neat and wanted to point it out. Well then, that brings us to the end of this little adventure, and overall, do I think this is a good Sonic game? Well, that answer is a little more complicated than it would seem. See, the problem I have is that half of this game is amazing to me, and legitimately a lot of fun, but the other half is a mixed bag of quality ranging from mediocre to freaking disgusting. Now, to answer the question I posed at the start, can I recommend this game? Well, that depends. Are you a Sonic fan who hasn't experienced the game yet for whatever reason? If you are, then I'd definitely say to check it out. But if you aren't a Sonic fan and are considering starting with this game, I don't really think so. It has a lot of aspects that have aged poorly, and again, only half of the game is really good in my opinion. And generally, I feel like later games are able to do a lot of what Sonic Adventure does, but a lot better. So with that, Sonic Adventure is finished, but we're not done with the Hedgehog just yet. Yeah, this wasn't a one and done, since I had so many problems with Sonic Adventure that just makes me more excited for the game that's up next in line. And with that, I hope you'll join me next time for Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Take care everyone, and I will see you all later.